Hey everyone, greetings. It's Naomi Wolf. I hope you had an amazing Christmas, Hanukkah holidays, whatever you're celebrating. I hope you celebrate all of it, honestly, because as you know, I think it's all a way to just give praise and thanks for our life, our food, our families, not in that order, our life, our families, our food, abundance in our lives, and just the privilege of being on this planet. Uh, I'm going to launch right in with number 17. Those of you who are following along, you know that the 1560 Geneva Bible, as I always say, is the Founders' Bible, the Puritans' Bible, and Shakespeare's Bible. It was not authorized by the state, something which I've never felt the need to point out before, except to say that the people who translated it in Geneva, kind of hiding out, were reformers of a state religion. And they had to do it in secret at the risk of their death. Some of them were martyred. Actually, in Oxford, there's a monument to some of the Reformation's martyrs who were burnt to death. But they did it because they wanted everyone to be able to read the Word of God without mediation. I say this over and over in my preamble because that's why my mission here, to bring this to you without any filters, any veils. We go all the way to the Masoretic Hebrew, which I read to you, which is kind of amazing that this is in one of the top podcasts in Judaism in multiple countries around the world, because you're being very patient with me reading a language that probably most of you don't understand. But I think we've done an amazing job getting into the Hebrew and looking at the English in the 16th century, and then fast forwarding to look at the English in the 21st century, seeing where the changes crept in most dramatically in the 21st and 20th century English translations, which are so inaccurate, as you know, in fundamental ways. But this reading, this mission, I kind of feel it's more important than ever. And I talked a little bit about this in my rant from 2 days ago with number 16. But things have gotten much, much worse. Sorry, I keep sitting up trying to find a comfortable place. There we go. In America, at least, and on social media, where unfortunately I have to spend a lot of my time, because there's clearly, as you know, I believe, a war against the West. And it's a war against our religious heritage as well as our history. And as you know, and I hate to say this, and I certainly hate to say it in this kind of context, but I think it's important, the war's methodology is now using extremist or fundamentalist Islam as a cat's paw to create intimidation, destruction, and really to replace the legal structures of the West and the religion. And so I never thought we'd have to talk like this because, as you know, I'm a big fan of, post-Enlightenment, secular, advanced democracies. But unfortunately, religion and religious sectarianism is unfortunately back in the public eye, even in America, which was supposed to have brought us past that. And the reason I'm stressing this right now is that 2 days ago, I said there's a horrible bot attack trying to claim that Christianity did away with Judaism and that Judaism is obsolete. And this was very disturbingly explained to me by a pastor who said that ill-educated ministers are telling their congregations in America that Jews are no longer the chosen people. They blew it. Christians are the chosen people. They have a new covenant, and the Old Testament is obsolete. Now, this would have been considered absolute blasphemy until quite recently by Christians. I'm not even saying by Jews. We never expect to be part of the dominant religious discussion anywhere we are. We're just happy to be alive and free to worship if we are. But that is a shocking, shocking message. And it was shocking to me to hear that it was really being disseminated systemically. Now I'm seeing an analogy to this online because I see repetitions. And of course, as a former political consultant, I'm alert to repetitions because that means that's a talking point. And that means there's a memo somewhere that says, these are our talking points, repeat them, repeat them, repeat them. Repetition is a core part of propaganda. So I'm getting a lot of kind of bot and troll hostility online since I posted a note about the fact that the Trump administration is using a lot of overt Christ is King language in its recent messaging, including the Department of Homeland Security. Different from Merry Christmas, have a blessed Christmas, may Christians in our country celebrate with joy the birth of their Savior. Like, all of that is totally wonderful. But to actually message from the state Christ is King type statements, and I love Christ, I love Jesus. Christus is a complicated word that means anointed, but I love Yeshua. I feel like I follow Yeshua. He's a big motivator in why I'm even reading this to you. This was his book that he grew up on, the Old Testament. That's what he was teaching and commenting on in synagogue when he was 12 years old. That's the law that he said not one jot or tittle will be changed in the law till the world passes away in Matthew. But as much as I love Yeshua, I love America, right? Which I think is a manifestation of God's highest purpose for humans, our system. I really do. Free will. And you see in this story of the Old Testament, God wants us to love him through free will. He doesn't want slaves. He doesn't want Stepford wife children. He doesn't want robots. He wants us to willingly choose to go to him, right? So as a result, a free democracy with freedom of worship, which has never existed before the United States established it in 1776 and 1789 with our founding documents, that is so important to the spiritual evolution of humans, I believe. Okay, these are my beliefs. Now, the First Amendment is very careful in saying not only that Congress shall pass no law concerning an establishment of a religion, that there will be no state-established religions. But as my friend, the NYU professor Mark Crispin Miller, who's an expert on propaganda, interestingly, pointed out today in a really good essay, warning about this language of a Christian America, there are other clauses like Article 11 in the Constitution that explicitly say that the United States will not be set up as a Christian nation. I just need to double check that citation, but if you want to look at it before I can do that, I encourage you to go to my pinned post on X, and that's Mark Crispin Miller's Substack. And let me see if I can, here it is. It's a really important essay by Mark Crispin Miller, and it says, and now I cannot find it. Here it is. That there's language in the Constitution specifically saying, do not set up a Christian America. America should not be set up as a Christian country. So why am I belaboring this? First of all, I think it's so interesting that post, which initially I was posting in response to Laura Logan, whom I respect very much. I love her. I love her work. I think she's a very brave woman, a very good reporter, just like I love Emerald Robinson. But Laura Logan also pointed out, I think quite inaccurately, that our children used to be taught that America was a Christian country and now it's not. Well, that's not true. I'm 63 years old. I went to public school. We were not taught at any point that America is a Christian country because it's not. It's just not. The great thing about our founders, and I've said this before, and wonderful Professor Mark Crispin Miller added to my my evidence about this, and you can look at the debates on the framing of the Constitution to see, much more about this very live issue, to what extent, or if at all, America should be founded as a sectarian religious nation. Okay, these were deep discussions at the time of our founders thinking about what will these final documents look like. Mark Crispin Miller added to my evidence that in fact specifically no, and here's why. And I'll just recap this. The founders of the United States came to this magical, pretty sparsely populated continent, the eastern seaboard of it, of course, at that time, from a Europe and an England that was being torn apart by religious sectarianism among Christians. Excuse me. The Quakers had to flee to Pennsylvania because they were being persecuted for being Quaker. That's a Christian sect. The Huguenots in France had to flee France because they were being persecuted for being a Christian sect. The Puritans had to come here in the first place from England because they were too puritanical for the established Church of England at that time. They wanted to worship God in too pure a way. This was not okay with the Christian state. So they had to flee and come to completely alien shores where they didn't even know how to farm or eat and start all over again. And our founders had, as Mark Crispin Miller brilliantly points out this morning, had a range of Christianities. Just like in America right now, there's a range of Christianities. There's a range of Judaisms. There's a range of Islamisms, for Lord's sake, everything, Hinduisms, Buddhisms, agnostics, everyone, right? There's a range. It's not all one monolithic thing. Mormons, okay? Seventh-day Adventists. I could go on and on. And he points out that our founders varied from being very kind of Orthodox Christians who were very full-throated about their Orthodox Christian faith, all the way to skeptics like Benjamin Franklin, and people who called themselves deists like Thomas Jefferson. And they were very interested in how the Enlightenment posited reason as opposed to faith. It doesn't get rid of faith, right? But the point of the Enlightenment, which was a system of thought that really hadn't existed in the West since I would say the decline of the Roman Republic, which inherited some Greek ideals, which were about reason as opposed to irrational faith or religious faith. Our founders wanted these foundational documents of ours to be grounded in a theory of reason rather than a specific faith, not because they were not faithful people. Some of them were very Orthodox Christians, others weren't, as I said, but because they knew that reason alone, no established faith, right, no obligatory faith, would be the only way to have a system which is ours, was at that time unique over the whole planet, right? And many other countries have tried to emulate it, of citizens rather than subjects. And the minute you have an established religion, my friends, you have subjects. You may think, and it may even be true, that your established religion is the only one. But when you've got an established religion, it is one small step to be for the state to become the religion, right? So they saw this. Our founders saw this, and they knew it. And they knew how easy it was to have the divisiveness and the corruption of an established church. Remember that the Reformation was nothing against Catholicism, but people need to reread history, ideally from old books, because it's being changed and altered as we speak. God bless the Catholic Church, the Church of Rome. But, the Reformation was a reaction of 700 years of growing corruption, and kind of sinecures, and priests having sex with nuns and having children, and like this really happened, and then selling indulgences, selling the right to sin and be forgiven. This was turning people off, and they were closely aligned with kings, or kings had to come to them on their knees, and they could make or break kings, as you saw with the whole reason the Church of England was established by Henry VIII. He wanted a divorce, and the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce. That's why it was established. That's what you get when you have a church and a state being the same thing. And the other thing I would say is people who are saying right now, I think very carelessly and thoughtlessly, oh, we are a Christian nation, we want to be a Christian nation, cheering J.D. Vance, stupidly claiming he's very well educated, he should know better, that we're a Christian nation. He's married to a non-Christian woman, for Lord's sake, as far as I know. She's not Christian to my knowledge to this date. It's a real abandonment of his obligation as the vice president to be a vice president for everyone, because our founders did not want the corruption and coercion and inability for people to be free subjects that goes along with a state established religion. The other thing you're going to get is what sect, right? Exactly like you got in Europe. If you're a Christian nation, everyone who's enthusiastic about that right now thinks, woohoo, we get to be a Christian nation and everyone will share our values. No, they won't. They won't. If you're an, Episcopalian and there's a Mormon, they believe they're Christian in power, and suddenly it's just Mormons in the administration, just Mormon schools, just Mormon teachings, just Mormon holidays, just Mormon sacred texts, and you can't be an Episcopalian in your church because the state says you won't get funding unless you use the Book of Mormon. No one's going to like that if they're Episcopalian. I could go on and on. Baptists, Protestants versus Catholics. What kind of Catholics? Greek Orthodox. I mean, there are thousands probably of Christian sects and denominations. And the history of Europe is the history of these people fighting with each other, the church fathers fighting with other Christian church fathers. That's how you get compromises like the Council of Nicaea, which established the Trinity, which didn't really exist as a creed until the 4th century in the Council of Nicaea, right? You've got to reread history, you guys. So the founders in their wisdom said, you know what, we're going to do it differently. What we're going to overtly establish is freedom of worship and freedom of conscience. And the other thing they specifically said is that everyone should be free to worship according to his conscience, which is radical. At that time, there was no such right in Europe at all, right? And how quickly, history proved them correct. I mean, you had an overthrow of the French government in 1789 with the French Revolution, and they established their own non-Christian Christian theology, and they started to kill people who didn't go along with it. They killed the priests, I mean, this is the story of history. Once you have any established thought system that, invokes God, let alone any other highest power, you have the temptation and you can claim the right to just get rid of people who don't go along with it. So it's a catastrophic thing to claim that America is a Christian country. It's a complete violation, or Jewish or Muslim, right? It's a total violation of our system. That is why radical Islam is such a threat, because unlike Judaism or Hinduism or Buddhism in America, radical Islam in America and the West does want to reestablish the legal system and to become a caliphate, to become a state entity, right? The other religions just want to worship freely. So it's very dangerous. And much as I love Jesus and hope people find Jesus because he's awesome, right? I do think the Trump administration, and certainly J.D. Vance, has overstepped the boundaries of the Constitution in being so theologically specific. And that's not censorship. That's just, the power of the state is a very big thing. And we found the power of the state abused, in the last administration tried to herd people into quarantine camps and inject them with medical, mystery juice and injure them and harm them and strip them of their liberties, lock them up. We cannot usher in any other form of tyranny, an unconstitutional behavior. We always have to be vigilant about it. So, and I'm very much regretting seeing TPUSA, which has so much to offer young people on college campuses, claiming erroneously that, and I see this online in the answers, the challenges to me, the founders were Christian, therefore it's a Christian country. That's completely specious reasoning. If your surgeon is Christian, it doesn't make it a Christian appendectomy. It's because they were so thoughtful about what it means to be all the things they were, which is many kinds of Christian, including skeptical, sort of post-Christians. For that reason, they were so thoughtful to say, we are going to have freedom of worship, freedom of conscience. And from the very beginning, Jews, for instance, were welcome and allowed to worship freely in a way that they hadn't been anywhere else. And by the way, that was before and after the revolution, ladies and gentlemen. There were Jews in the South. There were Jews in the French colonies. There were Jews in the Spanish colonies before America was a nation. So, please, this is not a Christian nation, and we shouldn't want it to be. And the last thing I'll say, the reason I think this is a very I personally think it's kind of a pro-Christian message, is the founders knew they were respecting God most by not enforcing any one religion, because the minute you have that enforcement, you also have your nephew wants a job. Is he Quaker? Well, okay, then we're all Quakers. Or, your nephew wants a job and he's Episcopalian, sorry, or Baptist, sorry that, we're just having Quakers here in Philadelphia, right? That's what it would have devolved to. And all the corruption, the contracts, the grift, what you see in Somalia, right? I'm Somalia, what a slip. What you see in Minnesota, right? All these people getting jobs because they're Somali Muslims. Or, you're going to get what you have in Nigeria, which is Christians being beheaded by Muslims. You're going to get sectarian violence like in Northern Ireland, where they were all Christian. The people who were killing each other were two kinds of Christians. How quickly we forget. So the founders wanted to actually honor, many of them, Christianity, but I would say they wanted to honor God by not messing it up that way, mixing the church and the state, keeping it pure. So that's why, and I was sorry to see this in the comments too, many people wrote to me and said, look, it says we acknowledge God, or through the grace of God, or Anno Domini, right? AD. Well, yeah, they acknowledged God, but I was horrified to learn that so many people, unless these are bots and trolls, think God and Christianity are the same thing. If you're Christian, you certainly believe in God through the religion of Christianity, and you may believe that Jesus Christ is God, which many people believe. It's a pretty late credo in the evolution of the Christian church, but God bless you if that's your belief. Christians don't own God. They don't own God in America. They don't own God in Africa. They don't own God in Europe. No one owns God, and many, many religions believe in a monotheistic God, like Judaism and Islam for that matter. So I was very horrified to learn that people seem to be being taught that, if they mentioned God, it means they're Christian. Some fundamentalist Christians that I've debated on, big shows seem startled when I point out that God is not a Christian term. It's not. This book we're reading talks about God, all the way through, has a central character who is God. If you look it up on Internet Archive, the 1560 Geneva Bible, the author is God. And that, was composed 3,400 years and more and less before the current moment, 1,500 years at least before Yeshua walked the earth in Palestine. So I don't know what to say. I'm demoralized and sad that there's so much ignorance, but it seems so clear to me. I'm really privileged to be in a position where, from the bots and trolls, I can see, what the funders of this manipulation of our consciousnesses want, because they want America to get more and more theologically Christian, so that there will be more and more division between Christians and Jews who have traditionally been like this because of our shared heritage and our shared religion, so that we'll be vulnerable to radical Islam. And that they want us to forget the unity that we have in a nation founded on freedom of conscience. We can all be together as Americans, as opposed to in any kind of theology or any kind of heightened theological sectarianism that's, my way or the highway. We all just become splintered into our camps. There are the Christians over there. There are the, Muslims. There are the Jews. There are the Buddhists. There are the Hindus. That's a great way to divide America and to invade it and establish Sharia law, run by Marxists. I'm sorry. So I'm going to stop there, but thank you for listening. Let's go to the actual text. And here is the 1560 Geneva Bible. And we're at Numbers 17. And do you remember that there was a rebellion and people rose up against Moshe, and God opened up the earth beneath them and swallowed them up. So here we go. Here's chapter 17. Oh, it's so hard to read for some reason. Let's see. The 12 rods of the 12 princes of the tribes of Israel. Aaron's rod buds and bears blossoms for testimony against the rebellious people. So that's the miracle that we're going to have in this chapter. And the Lord spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and take of every one of them a rod after the house of their fathers, of all their princes according to the family of their fathers, even 12 rods, and you shall write every man's name upon his rod. And write Aaron's name upon the rod of Levi, for every rod shall be for the head of the house of their fathers. And you shall put them in the tabernacle of the congregation before the ark of the testimony, where I will declare myself to you. And the man's rod whom I choose shall blossom, and I will make cease from me the grudgings of the children of Israel, which grudge against you. And that's like complain against you. Then Moshe spoke unto the children of Israel, and all their princes gave him a rod, one rod for every prince, according to the houses of their fathers, even 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. And Moshe laid the rods before the Lord in the tabernacle of the testimony. And when Moshe on the morrow, the next morning, went into the tabernacle of the testimony, behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi was budding, and brought forth buds, and brought forth blossoms, and bore ripe almonds. Oh my goodness. Then Moshe brought out all the rods from before the Lord unto all the children of Israel, and they looked upon them, and took every man his rod. And the note is very hard to read, but it says, though Joseph's tribe was divided into two, the distribution in the distribution of the land, yet here it is but one, and Levi's make a tribe. And the next note says, to declare that God did choose the house of Levi to serve him in tabernacle. Okay. Then Moshe brought out all the rods from before the Lord unto all the children of Israel, and they looked upon them and took every man his rod. After the Lord said unto Moshe, bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony, to be kept for a token to the rebellious children, and you shall cause their murmurings to cease from me, and they die not, that they die not. And the note says, grudging that Aaron should be his priest. And then they note the Chaldean text describes thus their murmuring. We die by the sword, the earth swallows us up, and pestilence does consume us. So I guess there's additional murmuring that's not in this version. So Moshe did as the Lord had commanded him, so did he. And the children of Israel spoke unto Moshe, saying, behold, we are dead, we perish, we are all lost. Whosoever comes near or approaches to the tabernacle of the Lord shall die. Shall we be consumed and die? Wow. So things are getting pretty intense there in the desert. And this is, about the murmurings, the complainings. As you recall, the children of Israel were complaining nonstop, and there had been a rebellion in the last chapter. You remember, the earth opened and swallowed up the leaders of the rebellion. So God, as I said, with number 16, we've only once seen him this angry. And let's see. And what he's clearly doing is taking away ambiguity from who is his priestly lineage. That's what the complaining was about. Remember, the leaders of the rebellion had said, why can't we be leaders? We're all holy. What makes you so special, Moses? Why do you, hold yourself up above all the rest of us? And God did not like that his directions were being completely disregarded. And Moshe warned the people, and you remember Moshe said, I didn't choose this. I don't like it. It's not fun to try to herd you cats, into the Holy Land. It's a constant struggle. And sure enough, the next day, God opened the earth and swallowed up the leaders of the rebellion and everything they owned, their children, their animals, their servants, their wives, and so on. So that has just happened. And you remember also the plague went among the people and was immediately stopped when Aaron kind of rededicated some incense to the Lord. The plague stopped. So what's really interesting about the Hebrew, which I'll show you now, I'm showing you, is the first half of it is part of the previous chapter in the Christian versions. And it's just really interesting that in the original Hebrew, it's part of a single chapter, chapter 17. Because, is it a repetition from chapter 16? Let's take a look. They assembled, the earth opened, it, fire came from the Lord and consumed the 250. All right. So it's one chapter in the Hebrew. And half of it is that the censers should be flattened out and laid out as plates to overlie the altar so everyone would remember that people should not be like Korah and his company. And so the last chapter ended in the Hebrew, as you recall, or in the English, you've killed the people of the Lord. All right. This is a little confusing. The plague has begun. No, we did have the plague in the last chapter, and the plague was checked. All right. So in the English versions, it begins with line 16. So the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, "V'yedaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor," which is a sentence you understand by now. Daber, speak, el bnei Israel v'kach meitam mateh, and take from them each mateh, a staff, the repetition, lebeit av me'et, to the house of their father, me'et kol nasiehem, among all their princes, lebeit avotam shnem asar matot, to the house of their fathers, 12 staffs, ish et shmo tichtov al matehu. Each man, his name should be inscribed on his staff. Ve'et shem Aharon, and the name of Aaron, tichtov al mate Levi, write on the staff of Levi, ki mate echad lerosh beit avotam, because there is one staff to the head of the house of their father. So God is clearly saying, let's just stop this nonsense. There's going to be one kind of emissary of the priestly house, of my house, okay? Vehinachtam, and you'll place, like literally you'll rest, ba'ohel moed, in the tent of meeting, lifnei ha'edut, in front of the congregation, asher ivaer lachem shama, which when I commune with you there. V'haya ha'ish asher evchar bo, and it'll be that the man whom I will choose him, matehu, his staff yifrach, will blossom. And this is such a beautiful word because perach is a flower, poreach is to flower, and yifrach means will flower. And you could just hear all of those tense. It's more than it will blossom, it will flower, right? It will turn into flowers. Vehashikoti me'alai et tlunot b'nei Israel, and I will calm down, turning away from myself, the complaints of the children of Israel, asher hem malinim alechem, which they are complaining against you. And I'm just going to see what word do they use for turning away or calming down. Oh, vehashkoti sheket. I will quiet their complaints. And forgive me for stumbling a bit in paragraphs like the last one, where there are a lot of unusual words that are not often used. I can sometimes stumble because of the nature of the punctuation in Hebrew, which there are no vowels, basically, the way there are in English. So you have to really look at what the called nekudot, the little dots in the letters, which you can see if I enlarge it. You can see there are little dots above and below the line. That's the punctuation showing you how to insert vowels, essentially. Vaydeber Moshe el bnei Israel, and Moses spoke to the children of Israel. Vayitnu elav, and they gave to him kol nisiehem, all of their princes, mateh lenasi echad, mateh lenasi echad, each chieftain one staff, levet avotam shnemasar matot, according to their father's houses, 12 shnemasar, 12 staffs, u mateh Aharon betoch metotam, and Aaron's staff was among their staffs. V'yanach, and leaned, literally, Moshe et hamatot, Moses the staffs, lifnei Adonai ba'ohel ha'edut, in front of God, in the tent of meeting. Now the translation is before the Lord, but it's literally in front of the face of God. And I just want you to notice the difference, because in the Hebrew, always, with the language, with the physicality, God is much closer and more apparent right there. It's like in the Hebrew, Moshe is putting them right in front of God's face. Okay, it's not the Lord before the Lord. That's much more metaphorical, right? Vayehi ha-macharat, and it was mi-macharat, from the next day or on the following day, v'yavo Moshe el ohel ha'edut, and Moses came to the tent of meeting, v'hine, and here, they translate that behold, but it's literally and here, like wow, like lo and behold. Hine parach mateh Aharon, flowered the staff of Aaron, lebet Levi, to the house of Levi, for the house of Levi. Vayatse perach, and there went out flowers. Veyatsek tzitz, and it gave forth blossoms. Veyigmol shkedim, and it produced ripe almonds. Sheked is an almond. Vayetze Moshe et kol hamatot, and Moses took out all the staffs, milifnei Adonai, from in front of the face of God, and they translate it from before the Lord, el kol bnei Israel, to all of the children of Israel, vayir'u vayikchu ish matehu, and they saw and they took each man his staff. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and you know what that means. And said God toward Moses, Hashev et mateh Aharon, return Aaron's staff, lifnei ha'edut, in front of the testimony, meaning the ark of testimony, the tent of the testimony, lemishmeret, Lishmor is something you guard, so they translate it keepsake, something you save. Lemishmeret, leot, as a sign, as a symbol. Libnei meri, for the rebellious ones. Ve'tchal tlunotam me'alai velo yamutu. Then their complaints against me will end and they will not die. So God is like really trying to, the character of God is so fascinating. He hates to destroy his children. He hates to even punish them when they, thoroughly deserve it. He is always trying to find a loophole for them. So here he's found another loophole. Look, people get rebellious. They forget, they go off track. They forget about me. They forget about what I want. Let's make a note that we put on the refrigerator. Don't rebel against God's will. Let's put tie a string around their finger. Let's put the staff in front of the tent of meeting so that everyone will remember that this is my decision, that the Levies are the priests, the priestly family, and they need to stop complaining. And because I don't want them to die. Clearly God isn't liking the events of the previous day in which he wiped out, all these families who were so rebellious. He doesn't want to do it again. V'ya'as Moshe, Ke'asher tziva Adonai, and this word ya'as is from oseh, which is to make, to do. It's an important word, as you remember, because when the children of Israel actually do what God asks, there's this v'kach asu, there's this like finality, and they did it. Like that's very important, that God doesn't just want us to say, okay, fine, God, I get it, I hear you, but to actually do the thing. So Moshe did it, and of all the people in the Bible to date, maybe Abraham, right? But of all the people in the Bible to date, the one who consistently executes what God asks him to do is Moshe. Moses is the one who does it. He does it. He delivers, which I think is a big message for us, that our lives on this planet are not just about going to mass or going to synagogue and sort of saying, sorry, I blew it. We're supposed to do the thing every day in our lives. V'ya'as Moshe ke'asher tziva Adonai, that which God had commanded, oto, him. Ken asa, there it is. Yes, he did it. That repetition. He did it twice. Okay. V'ya'as Moshe, and he did, Moses, ke'asher tziva Adonai, that which God commanded, oto, him. Ken asa. Yes, he did it. So that sentence is divided in two. In the English, Moses did so, period. He did just as the Lord had commanded him, period. And that's a reasonable translation. But a literal translation is, and he did it. Yes, he did it. He did exactly what God asked him to do. Yes, he did it, period. Like, it's a compound sentence in English, right? Two verbs. But it's stressing that he did it. He did what God asked, all right, which is all God is wanting. V'yomru b'nei Israel, and the children of Israel said, El Moshe, to God, lemor, that is to say, hen gavanu, gavinu, avadnu kulanu, avadnu. Behold, we are dying, we will perish, we are all lost. And it's so beautiful in Hebrew. Avadnu, ani overet mashu, I've lost something, right? It's literally, I've lost it. I lost a purse. I lost a wallet. Avadati oto, I lost it. So they're saying, we are lost. All of us, we are lost. It's almost Shakespearean, that repetition. Kol ha-kerev, hakarev, again, repetition. Everyone, you know what that root means, who draws near to the closeness, the closest, it's translated, El Mishkan, to the Mishkan, to the place of the Lord, Adonai, Yamut, Ha'im, Tamnu, Ligvoa. Have we been consigned to die? Ligoa, it could be Ligoa, Tamnu Ligoa. Whoever comes the closest to the Mishkan of the Lord dies. Have we been consigned to die? All right, so you brilliant students should know, because we've been doing this for a while, that there's something really sad that's happened here. What is it? I'm asking the class. What used to be the case about everyone who wanted to lehakriv, his or her offering to the Lord in the tent of meeting? Everyone could lehakriv, right up into that inner sanctum where the veil was. Everyone could draw near to the Lord. So this is a change. This is a change. There's a change in who gets to draw near to the Lord. And you remember before this, everyone kind of looked after God's house together. These three tribes on the left, these three tribes on the right, these three tribes in the front, these three tribes in the back. They all had special jobs and special tasks in carrying the broken down apartment where God lived, basically. The tent, the poles, the silver and gold, I should say golden rings, the beautiful embroidered cloths, the special appurtenances were carried by a special tribe. I believe the Levites, I'd have to check. But everyone had a job in looking after God's house, which is very intimate, and everyone got to see God. There's God. Remember in the last chapter, I said they're making appointments, like in their day books, saying, I'll meet you at 10 a.m. outside of God's house. Like God was literally, we think today of God sitting in heaven, most of us, if we, absorb or inherit Western narratives about where God lives. If you ask most children by the time they're 10, if there's any kind of faith discourse in their lives, you say, where does God live? They might say in heaven, right? They're likely to say in heaven, but that's not where God lived at this time with the children of Israel, where he's trying to forge a monotheistic, well, more than that, he's trying to forge a moral community on earth. That's his project here, okay? And if you don't get it by now, you're not paying attention, right? He's not doing anything more important than trying to make a family that has a moral order, which, by the way, is something a lot of us are trying to do. I mean, I would say that's a main task of many of us. If you asked us every day, what is your most important thing that you're doing in your life? A lot of us would say, if given the chance, I'm trying to raise a moral family, or I'm trying to raise a healthy, loving family with children who know how to do right and to do right by my spouse. Like, that's many people's primary job. Well, that's God's main job in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. And he's trying over and over and over, and we're messing it up over and over and over. So in this moment, something's really changed. Everyone got to hang out with God in the desert. It was uncomfortable. It had a boring menu. They missed the food in Egypt. They sometimes lost faith that they were going to get to the promised land. They were scared that the people in the promised land already are giants, and they saw them as grasshoppers. All of this they're going through, but they got to live with God, and see him every day. So now something's changed. God is so mad that he no longer trusts. Basically, it's a betrayal. It's like adultery, or something horrible. If you can imagine something horrible your child would do to you, it's hard to imagine a child doing something so horrible that you never trust them again. But God is basically saying, it's not going to be like that anymore. You guys can't all come hang out with me. I'm sorry. It's not working. He's saying only the Levites can draw near to me. And the children of Israel are crying because they understand what they've done, with their obnoxiousness, really, and their entitlement. I mean, it's always translated as rebelliousness, but it's much more hurtful than that. They're just being, I said little bitches in my last, broadcast, and then I corrected myself because I don't want to be blaspheming, but they're kind of, I have to say it again, they're kind of being entitled little bitches. They really are. They're being little divas. It's not this elevated rebellion, like for a higher purpose. So we don't really believe, Moses, that you're really, God's emissary. No, they're like literally this is why I so believe that this really happened in some way, because and I said this in our last session, but it's not like, the the princes of the tribe of Benjamin and the princes of the tribe of, Manasseh got together and said, Moses, we don't believe that God really is well served by your leadership. Or even, we're concerned about the leader, how many people are dying in the desert. No, it's literally that verisimilitude of, who do you think you are? Do you think you're dad's favorite? You're not dad's favorite. We're all holy. It's so obnoxious. Remember how bitchy and passive aggressive the language was in chapter 16. It's like, what did they say? You're taking on too much, Moshe. And he's like, you're taking on too much. It has such a ring of petty little, ego-driven squabbles in the desert. Seriously, human nature does not change. It's not elevated. They're being obnoxious brats. And I get God's point of view. God's like, I am the Lord of hosts. I'm the creator of heaven and earth. I chose to come to this plane of this planet that I created and hang out with you guys every single day, feed you, get you to safety, get you to the promised land, give you the 10 commandments. I'm doing all of that. And you need to just do one or two things that I'm asking you to do, one or two at a time. It does add up to a number of things, but nothing overwhelming. And, in this case, please respect my choice. It's, Aaron and Moshe. There's a reason I put them in these roles. And he can't even get that level of, I like to say alignment rather than obedience. So I get his frustration, and I get him saying, I thought we could all hang out together. I thought anyone could come approach me, but it's not working out. I need to have these people that I can trust. It's kind of like what happens to movie stars when they've been exploited too much. They start to, or very wealthy people, they start to just draw back and not be as inclusive and just hang out with their own people that they trust or their own inner circle. It's really sad, but it's an estrangement for sure. And that's why you saw the word hikriv. People used to be able to draw near to God, and now they cannot draw near. So now I'm just going to come quickly to the last one. And I'm just going to scan it quickly. I looked through it, of course, earlier. I really don't like the and behold. It's much too kind of archaic. It's really and here, but Chabad also translated and behold. So I'm not going to give them too much. I'm not going to criticize them too much for that. Let's see. Then Moses brought all the lords, and they looked, and each man took his rod. And the Lord said to Moses, put back the rod of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their murmurings against me, lest they die. I'm sorry, you guys. I need to wrap it up here. Hey, I'll call you right back. I'm just live on video, okay? 5 minutes. Thank you. Sorry about that. Put back the rod of Aaron before the testimony, be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of your murmurings against me, lest they die. I don't think that's exactly how line 9 is in the Hebrew. We'll take a look in just a minute. And also in line, from all their leaders, it's interesting. The Revised Standard Version translates Nasi as leaders, whereas it's much more accurate to say princes. And so you shall deposit them in the tent of meeting before the testimony. In the Hebrew, it's, and you shall literally like lean them or rest them in the tent of meeting before the testimony, where I meet with you. And the rod of the man whom I choose shall sprout. That's much less poetic than it is in Hebrew. As you know, it's shall flower. Thus I will make to cease from me the murmurings of the people of Israel, which they murmur against you. 12 rods, and Moses deposited, again, what a bad, I'm sorry, I hate this translation. He didn't deposit the rods before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. He rested them. in front of the face of God, as you remember. So, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. They looked, each man took his rod. And let's see what line 10 says in the Hebrew. I just don't think that's right. Let's see what it says in the Geneva Bible, which is always very well translated. Share the screen. Let's take a look at the Geneva Bible. Line 10, 17. This is after the Lord said unto Moses, bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony to be kept for a token, right? Like a remembrance to the rebellious children, and thou shalt cause their murmurings to cease from me, that they die not. That is a completely different sentence than line 10 in the Revised Standard Version, which I will show you again. I'm going to stop the screen, and it's a totally different translation. Sometimes it's so extraordinary to see how very different the translations are. This is, and the Lord said to Moses, put back the rod of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels. Now, remember, in Hebrew, it's as a memory and a sign for the rebellious ones, right? It's not just rebels. That you may make an end of their murmurings against me, lest they die. Is that what God is saying? That you may make, that you shall cause their murmurings, and you shall, okay, that's what the difference is. In the Hebrew and in the Accurate Revised Standard Version, the grammar is that these rods, Aaron's rod, which burst into flower, should be kept as a token, meaning a memorial, for the rebellious children, right? Meaning anyone can be rebellious, and it's helping them to remember. God wants to help them to remember. And then he says, and you shall cause their murmurings to cease from me, that they die not. So God in the original is saying, this is a way to help them not die, because you can remind them what happens, and that I chose Aaron, and you can cause their murmurings to stop before me so that they won't die. In the Revised Standard Version, it gives all the authority to Moshe, who again is, I've said over and over, the Revised Standard Version over exaggerates or falsely places into position kind of priestly authority that didn't exist previously in the original. And the Revised Standard Version gives Moshe the right to kill people, or the right to silence them and threaten them with being killed. Like it literally says that. Let's look at it again. Numbers 17, which of course gives the church, all the power in the world, but that's not what God was saying. God was saying, I don't want them to die. Isn't that crazy? And the Lord said to Moses, this is the Revised Standard Version, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die. So I'm shocked. Once again, I'm going to show you this translation. The grammar in the modern Revised Standard Version basically says you have the power, Moshe, to silence them, and it implies, and even kill them. Thus did Moses, as the Lord commanded him, so he did. Everyone who comes near to the tabernacle of the Lord shall die. Are we all to perish? Behold, we perish, we are undone, we are all undone. So also that's a mistranslation. It's not undone, it's lost. We are lost, which is much stronger. You guys, God didn't tell Moshe he has the power to silence the rebels and threaten them with being killed. He didn't. You just heard the original. As usual, it's much sweeter and more patient from God to humans in the original. God is trying to say, look, put this blossoming staff in front of the tent of meetings so that everyone who is tempted to rebel, which in the original is everyone, right? Not just the rebels, right? Will think twice and not rebel, so that they won't die, so that that will help you, Moses, keep them from complaining against me and protect them from death. It's a completely different implication in the modern translation. You have the right to shut them up. You have the right to kill them. No, God didn't say that. God is much, much nicer in the original. You guys, we've been talking for an hour. There's lots of comments. I wish I had time to go through all of them, but I'm waiting for transportation on this very snowy day, so I should probably get off in just 5 minutes. But Barry Atkinson, hey Barry, a good friend of ours, says, it's interesting that in Hebrew, Moshe's name is a mirror reflection of Hashem. Oh, that is interesting. The name, very cool. Moses is a reflection of God's words. That's so interesting. And Barry, that's lovely. It's the first I've thought about it. But it's true. And here's the car pulling up for me. So I'm going to have to go. But you're right. And I mean, you're right that there's that echo. I don't know if etymologically there's that echo. I'll look into it. But metaphorically, absolutely. Moshe is so effective as a leader because he listens to what God actually wants. I have a young stepson. Did I say stepson? I have a young relative who told me exactly what he wanted for Christmas, and I got him exactly what he wanted, and he was so happy. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a very expensive thing at all. It's just what he wanted. God wants the same thing, just for us to listen. You guys, I've got to keep the car from getting bogged down in the snow, so I'm going to go. We've been talking for over an hour. So fun. Let's see. Lots of comments from Roscoe Rossi, also a good friend of ours. This is interesting. We read Korach to protect ourselves from natural disasters in Kabbalah tradition. How interesting. I did not know that. Well, that's really good to know. And lots of interesting comments. Amen, sister. Not always easy to speak the truth. Let's end it there. Thank you. And thanks for joining me. Merry Christmas belatedly. Happy Hanukkah belatedly. Happy New Year. I'm going on retreat for 5 days, so I will try to do one or two more commentaries or podcasts before I go, but I might have a little break over the new year. And if I do, I will see you in the new year. And if not, I'll see you in my next podcast. Remember, if you care about these, they're really making a difference. Amazingly, we're one of the top podcasts in Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, Pakistan. It's incredible. And in the top 150 for Judaism in the US, top 200 in Canada. So I guess people want to know what those texts really said. And I'm honored to do my part to bring it to you. And I love you to bits, but we really do need your help. So if you're thinking about an end of year gift, send it over to Outspoken on Substack or over to Daily Clout as a donation or a subscription. It's how we keep going. And I love you all. Bless you. And I'll see you very soon. Okay. Bye-bye.